Unable to breathe. That's what kills the people who die from COVID-19. Their lungs infected and damaged by the virus, by secondary infections, and even by their own immune systems, somewhat overzealous in their attack. But they die unable to breathe. A few days ago, this made me think about some of the people I have known through my life who have been affected, unable to breathe. So I'll go through some of those people. In the mid-'80s, a friend and coworker who, whenever I saw her, I swear she was always smiling. She went fishing one weekend on the Pacific Ocean, on the rocks on the Pacific with her boyfriend, who was also a coworker, and she fell in the water, and he went after her to help her. And they both drowned, unable to breathe. And then there was a man who, in his 40s, his mother confessed to him that when he was a small child, she had one time put her hand over his nose and mouth to quiet him because he was whining. And that was amazing that she could ever confess that. I'm not sure whether it was at the time because he was in need, and so she could reach out as a mother and confess something that had probably been festering in her as guilt for 40 years. But again, hand over her nose. And mouth, unable to whine, but unable to breathe. And the funny thing is, that man had no recollection of that event, but imagined, oh, it must have been something he'd repressed all those years and was going to come out at some point, but just needed to come out. Well, that never happened. There was only the confession and his recognition. And I don't think he ever told her that it was okay. He was okay with it. She had done something she didn't think was a good thing and afterwards, but it did not scar him. And then I had a friend who was one of the most vivacious, energetic, loving people I have ever known. And in the mid-'90s, I don't even remember what it was, but she came down with a disease which rapidly was bringing her down. I visited her in the hospital. I didn't actually get near her. She was in a room with all kinds of machinery around her on a ventilator. And when she saw me, she gave a look that I can only describe as something between utter terror and a need to scream and yell out her need, but unable to because of the ventilator that she needed because she was unable to breathe on her own. She died, I think, a couple of days later. And then there was me. About 7 years ago, I was in the hospital, had some surgery, and I was put under anesthesia. When I woke up, there was a breathing tube down my throat, so I couldn't breathe. No, I could breathe. I couldn't speak. This is the first time I've ever had, and hopefully the last time I've ever had, a breathing tube down my throat. But at first it was kind of scary because I was just waking up and there was something down my throat, and it took me a couple of seconds to realize I was still breathing. But the fear of being unable to breathe was my first reaction when I woke up. And that subsided after I realized, no, I just had this incredibly uncomfortable thing shoved down my throat. And at first I pointed to the people who were in the room. Take this out. You know, I couldn't speak, but gesture, get this out, take this out. And I forget what they said, but something to the effect that I needed to keep it for a little while. So after a few minutes, I don't know how many, they took out the tube. And it's kind of funny. As soon as the tube was out, I looked at a PA who was in the room, in the room, and said, the very first words out of my mouth were, "Gee, you're cute." Okay. She took it okay. And then there's my dad, who died 10 years ago. Some years earlier, he had developed symptoms of dementia, and it progressed and progressed. And I was in Maine at the time. He was in New Jersey, but he was getting progressively worse and was in, I don't know if it was, I forget if it was a hospital or just in the nursing home, but there was a do not resuscitate request, instructions for him, by him. And he one day aspirated some food and started choking, unable to breathe. I wasn't there. I think luckily none of my family was there, but because who could witness that loved him without wanting to do something? And he died. And then just really a week ago or so, a young friend expressed his anger at all the attention that COVID-19 is getting because his mother died of a respiratory illness, one he never actually told me the name of, but she died of it just last year. And I understood his anger because, and he explained it. So all this attention given this respiratory disease now, while whatever killed his mother was given so little, has been given so little, that I suppose, he didn't say this, but suppose that he thought if it had that much attention, if that much attention had been given to that disease, maybe his mother would be alive. But she died, unable to breathe. So we're all surrounded by COVID-19. I checked, I think a couple of days ago, there were only 18 countries in the world where it had not yet been reported. But every 50 states of this country, it has been reported. And I just want to say that our government is doing what it can, our governments, state governments as well, in this country. But we should not depend on that. People are working on cures. They may come up with something, but we should not depend on that. People are working on vaccines, and we should not depend on that. What we need to depend on is ourselves. All the measures that we're taking, that are suggested, that are recommended, in some places mandated, to isolate ourselves from each other so that we neither give others COVID-19 or get COVID-19 from others. So it's the same instructions, very simple, but it applies to everyone, and it will work most effectively if everyone does it. And hopefully, we can then minimize the number of people who die unable to breathe.